All right, let's just dive right into this explainer by tackling what is arguably one of the most hotly debated topics in reproductive medicine right now: sperm DNA fragmentation, or SDF. If you're a urologist or a fertility clinician, you literally know exactly what I'm talking about here. You've been to the conferences, you've seen half the room swear by SDF testing as this absolutely mandatory diagnostic tool, while the other half just kind of rolls their eyes and dismisses it as unnecessary noise. Well, today we're going to cut right through that noise and look at the actual data.
So here's the million-dollar question. Is SDF testing actually ready for prime time? Or is it, just hype? While some professional society guidelines still mostly ignore it, and others have gone all in, we're going to break down the brand new Global Andrology Forum, or GAF, clinical guidelines. These were built specifically to settle this debate for your daily practice, bringing together the latest systematic reviews and global expert consensus to give us a definitive path forward.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. Who actually needs testing? The ART controversy, first-line management, the antioxidant dilemma, and finally, surgical interventions. Let's get to it.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer level of agreement among the experts. When they use the rigorous grades system to evaluate 24 specific clinical statements, a massive 87.5% achieved a strong consensus rating among the 52 global experts. Think about that. Despite all the loud academic debates we hear, there's actually a really robust shared understanding of how to practically apply this in the clinic.
Okay, part 1. Who actually needs testing? The diagnostic debate. Let's figure out exactly who needs this test so we aren't just wasting patients' money.
Check out this stat, 52.7%. That means basically 1 in 2 men walking into your clinic with idiopathic infertility is hiding pathologic SDF values. These are guys who might just have a single, minor abnormality on a standard semen analysis, but no obvious underlying cause. It turns out, over half of them have a hidden problem right there at the DNA level.
So what this tells us is that SDF can actually explain a huge chunk of those incredibly frustrating idiopathic cases. And here's the kicker. Paternal age is a massive factor. The data clearly shows that hitting age 38 is an independent predictor of having a DNA fragmentation index over 30%. As guys get older, oxidative stress spikes, the germ cell's apoptotic potential drops, and you end up with a lot more fragmented DNA.
Because of all this, the GAF came down with some strong recommendations for counseling patients on SDF testing in specific scenarios. Number 1, unexplained infertility. Number 2, and this is a big one, recurrent pregnancy loss regardless of whether their conventional semen parameters look totally fine. Number 3, during a clinical varicocele workup. And lastly, for guys showing up with modifiable risk factors, your smokers, older patients, or those struggling with obesity.
But hang on. What if the guy sitting across from you has a subclinical varicocele? Do we still order the test? The guidelines draw a really hard line here. They explicitly state testing is absolutely indicated for clinical varicoceles to help guide your management, especially if the standard semen parameters are normal. But for subclinical ones, no way. Repairing a subclinical varicocele just hasn't been shown to improve SDF, so testing for it simply isn't going to change your game plan.
Moving on to Section 2, the ART controversy. Does SDF actually dictate the success of IVF and ICSI?
This divide in the literature is honestly stark. In standard IVF, high SDF is a massive red flag. It strongly predicts lower pregnancy and lower live birth rates. But when we look at ICSI, the outcomes show almost no significant difference between high and normal SDF levels. Why is that? Well, with ICSI, the oocytes repair mechanisms kick in earlier, and the sperm aren't sitting around in overnight cultures soaking up laboratory-induced oxidative stress. So practically speaking, if you're counseling a couple staring down the barrel of recurrent ART failures, whether that's fertilization failure, implantation failure, or loss after IVF or ICSI, the GAV strongly recommends getting that SDF test. This is absolutely critical for men over 40 or those with known risk factors, assuming the female partner's workup is normal, of course. And crucially, if it comes back high, taking active steps to lower that SDF before their next cycle is strongly recommended.
All right, Section 3, first-line management strategies. Beyond the diagnosis, how do we handle this?
So what's the game plan before we rush to the OR? The guidelines give a strong nod to this straightforward 3-step conservative approach. Step 1, tackle the lifestyle stuff. Push for weight loss, quitting smoking, cutting back on alcohol. Step 2, clear up any underlying genitourinary infections. But step 3 is where it gets really interesting, and honestly, it's the easiest to implement. Drastically cut down the ejaculatory abstinence window. The guidelines recommend a super short 12 to 24-hour window before trying to conceive or giving a sample.
It just stops the sperm from sitting around in the epididymis accumulating DNA damage.
Which brings us to Section 4, the antioxidant dilemma, magic bullet or weak evidence.
Seriously, what about antioxidants? Half your patients are probably already taking a pharmacy's worth of unregulated supplements when they walk in. Do we just blindly prescribe them to everyone with high SDF hoping for the best? Or does the evidence tell us to be a bit more cautious?
Well, the guidelines finally give us some clarity here. You can absolutely offer them to guys with elevated SDF, especially if they have known oxidative stress risks like obesity or smoking. That gets a strong recommendation. But, and it's a big but, the evidence that antioxidants actually increase spontaneous pregnancies, that's graded as weak. On top of that, there's a strong consensus that their actual impact on live births and miscarriage rates is still highly controversial.
I think this direct quote really hits the nail on the head. Right now, there is absolutely no consensus on the ideal type, dosage, or duration of antioxidant therapy. Sure, surveys show about half of us always prescribe them, but the literature is completely lacking a standardized regimen. You really just have to weigh those low-risk potential benefits against the reality that we don't have robust outcome data yet.
Finally, Section 5, surgical and advanced interventions. When do we actually operate?
Listen, if you've got a patient with a clinical varicocele, the consensus is rock solid. Repairing it genuinely moves the needle. The meta-analyses consistently show it drops SDF levels, so you should absolutely offer repair to infertile men with clinical varicoceles and high fragmentation. And here's a really great clinical pearl for you. If a guy still has persistent infertility after you repair his varicocele, order another SDF test. Even if his standard semen parameters look picture perfect now, test the SDF anyway.
Now, over in the lab, sperm selection techniques like MACs or microfluidics, those get a strong recommendation if you're dealing with elevated SDF and RAT failure. But, and this is an important distinction, when it comes to using testicular sperm for ICSI, based on the idea that it has less DNA damage, the guidelines explicitly say it is not recommended for routine use. You can consider it if you've exhausted other options, but you have to counsel the couple that it's based on pretty low-quality evidence right now.
At the end of the day, these 24 statements from the Global Andrology Forum give us an incredibly nuanced, evidence-based framework. They totally acknowledge the messy academic debates and the gaps in the literature, but they still manage to hand us concrete, actionable steps for the actual human beings sitting in your exam room today. So, armed with all this, the real question is, how is this going to change your practice tomorrow morning? Are you going to start routinely testing your recurrent pregnancy loss patients? Are you going to start recommending that super short 12-hour abstinence window? The evidence is all laid out here. Now it's up to you how to wield it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep pushing for the best possible outcomes for your patients. Catch you next time.